Chapter 18. Rip. Under Tepid's guidance, the ATR took the little battered ship away from that awful place and headed north, far away from any land, to finally search for the rain monster. Without the sailors, no one got much rest, but in the brief snatches of time away from the sheets and ropes, they worked hard putting together their potion poison pill. The mermaid scales were exceedingly tough and took days to grind up. They all took it in turns to sit with a scale in a pestle and mortar, pounding it into submission until their hands got blisters. At last, the scales were reduced to a fine powder that glittered in the candlelight. Very carefully, with one person pouring and another mixing, they added the Goromasoltia slime, bit by bit, under Abrian's supervision. The result was a strange-smelling paste that could be rolled into a ball not even Dominator was tempted to lick. Delilah then held it tightly in her hands and let her white magic flow out of her fingers. The ball grew warm, and a strange prismatic light came from inside it, shining brightly enough to light the bones in her hands. She stayed there all day, sealing the ingredients together in the potion poison pill until, finally, it became hard and firm. Abrian declared it was ready. Bligh did his very best to stay involved with his friends, keeping busy in all the activity. He stayed away from the lookout point. If he was up there, all he would be able to think about was how scared he felt. Now he knew what being a ghost really meant. All he could do was keep moving with the little ship and his friends, and finish this adventure. Even if he had no idea what he would do when they finally returned home. Only he, Delilah, and EA knew his secret, and he didn't want to let the others in on it. Not when they were so close to completing their mission. Days wore by and the rain began to grow thinner. The air grew warmer as well. It felt thick, almost sliceable, as if they were drawing near to a summer storm, though back in Fealdnor autumn was well underway. The sea was as grey as the sky, and mist and fog began to replace the rain they had become so used to. It was thin on the first day, but by the morning of the 5th it had completely enclosed the entire boat. Bligh didn't sleep that night, and was the first outside. He looked about the deck. No one was to be seen. Fog and vapours rose all around. Suddenly there was the most curious, sonorous, tumbling splash of water from below. Then it happened again, from the opposite side of the ship. As the vessel floated onwards, this continued until the sound surrounded the whole ship. Looking over the rail, Bligh stared as water swelled up from deep below, broke, and spread beneath the surface. It was like bubbles being released, travelling up from the hidden blue depths beneath them. But these weren't ordinary bubbles. Something was different. There was no sheen or wobble of air. It was more like a different kind of water altogether, thicker, warmer, and more lively. It surrounded the ship with rolling sloshes and ripples, causing curtains of vapour to break into the air as the boiling seawater hit the cold surface, and Bligh understood. They had reached where the rain was coming from at last. Gradually the others emerged, curious about the sound. After a quick, whispered discussion, they all agreed this must be the place. It was like being inside a kettle. All the vapour around them was rising slowly into the air, ready to condense and fall far away as the rain that had pursued them everywhere. Everyone was on alert now, gazing out into their surroundings for any shape, any sign of the monster that awaited them. But visibility was low. Everything was grey and steaming. The masts were scarcely visible, and as they ploughed deeper still into the fog, the front of the ship became entirely obscured in mist. Their footsteps and voices were oddly muffled as they strode to and fro. Delilah stood very still next to Bligh, staring out into the swirling blankness, the potion poison pill clutched tightly in a pouch at her side. An hour slipped by, and still they found nothing. Another 2 hours and they were all beginning to feel confused. The rain monster must be big to make the sea boil like this. Even if they couldn't see it, they would have bumped into it by now.
"Unless it swam away?"
asked Annie tentatively.
"Then why is the sea still bubbling?"
said Morphea, looking concerned. Bligh stared at his reflection over the edge of the boat. That was it? No big monster? Not even a little monster? Just an angry bit of the sea? This couldn't be it. They'd all been through so much. Maybe Maemia made a mistake, Abrian said, looking at his map, his brow furrowed. Maybe you didn't guide us to the right part of the ocean, Honno suggested, snarkily looking over his shoulder. No, we're definitely here, Abrian replied, pointing to a circled area on the map. But we could be anywhere in that circle, Honno responded. Delilah walked over to Bligh. She looked up at him, one hand resting on her stomach, the other wishing it could hold his hand. She knew that look on him. It was all too familiar after the incident with the Spirit Eater.
Maybe we should go and ask Maemia. There might be time to retrace our journey now we've made the potion poison pill. No.
Bligh murmured. Delilah was sure she could see red sparks crackling off him.
I see something,
called Annie. She was pointing over the edge of the prow down to the sea. Abrian dashed to the front, Morphea and the others close behind.
I don't see anything, said Gina.
No, you have to look further, right down there,
insisted Annie, almost hanging off the side. Not very far in front of the ship, there seemed to be the highest concentration of bubbles. These stopped abruptly, for no apparent reason, in a wide, ragged circle. The water inside this circle was perfectly calm, almost unnaturally still. As they squinted at it, they could see the vague form of something dark, very dark. The strange bubbles were issuing from all around it, as if being repelled outwards. Something under the water, whispered Honno, grabbing Gina before she could make a leap into the sea. Don't! We have no idea what that is.
It looks like just a shape,
said Tepid, also leaning over the side.
I do believe that seems to be a geographical feature of some sort. It's hard to tell.
So, there's no monster?
Dominator said, looking up.
Nothing to feed this magic potion poison pill to? We searched for those ingredients for nothing?
Don't say that. began Honno, but Dominator's temper was getting the better of him.
I don't understand. There should be something here.
It's not like we can make something appear, said Honno angrily. Dominator spun his hands, conjuring the shape of a monster with his orange magic.
Yes, we can actually. Stop it. That's not solving anything,
growled Morphea, waving the magic aside. Bligh could see their resolve slipping. Inside, his fear began to rise up again.
What are we supposed to do then?
Snapped Gina.
The rain's still here, and we don't have a clue.
Bligh wished they would stop shouting. They couldn't give up. Everything was slipping out of control. They were wasting precious time. Pain was beginning to seep back into his head.
Please don't.
Delilah stepped in between her friends.
Don't fight now. We can always keep looking.
But for what? Bligh clenched his fists. This was so stupid. They were being so stupid.
This can't be it.
The pain got worse. It was all in their hands. He couldn't do anything. They were letting it slip away.
Then think of something.
And Bligh did.
It's not fair,
he shouted, pounding his fists through the railings. Hey, Bligh, we'll work it out, Honno said, walking towards the angry ghost. The rain isn't going any... But Bligh had already reached through the pouch carrying the potion poison pill, the ground-up mermaid scales allowing him to pick it up, and hurled it into the ocean. Bligh, what are you... Abrian couldn't finish his sentence before the ghost flung himself into the water after it. Bligh could barely hear Delilah's panicked yell as he sunk below the ocean's surface. Twists of magic spiralled around him as he went further down.
What am I doing?
He suddenly thought. He was descending into the depths of the sea once more, into the murky blue gloom. Flashes of Chroniese Pin's tentacles filled his mind. Why did he just throw away their ingredients? And what if there was another spirit eater lurking down here? He spun around, looking in every direction. It was only then he noticed the structures around him. Enormous, rocky towers and spires rose up from the ground like imposing castles. From the tips of their spires, some sort of extremely powerful fluid was billowing up towards the surface. Judging by the shaking haze around each tower, they must have been ridiculously hot. Bligh turned about again and saw, rising up behind him, the tallest, widest tower of them all. It could have been older than the glass mountains, older than Gadav's cave. Its rocky sides were encrusted with layer upon layer of aged minerals, with skeletons of decaying marine life encased in its skin. As he drew closer to it, he saw the stone was quaking, vibrating like a bell that had been struck too hard. The water around him shimmered, and, briefly, a rainbow of colour shot through it. Looking back at the fluid coming from the other vents, Bligh realised it wasn't water bubbling all around. It was magic. Clear magic filled with every colour rose up from the seabed's deep heart to disperse and circulate throughout the sea in a powerful current, the lifeblood of their world. The further down he went, the stronger the magic became. Vents sprouted up around him, spewing clear magic into the ocean and off to the various lands and nations. Then he saw it. Stretched across the water above the largest vent was a rip, a massive, tattered rip in the fabric of reality. The edges were torn and greying. The space inside was a void. It wasn't black as if there wasn't any light coming from it. It just wasn't there. It was like someone had covered one of Bligh's eyes, but not the other. There was just a space of nothingness. Looking at it made Bligh's head hurt. When the clear magic shooting from the mouth of the vent hit the rip in the fabric of reality, it was repelled away, unable to travel through to the nothingness beyond. All this power, all this energy spewing from the vent was being forced back inside itself. The tower must have been superheating with all the magical energy flowing the wrong way. At last, Bligh saw the full scope of the damage that had been spreading. Gadav coming through the hole in the cave. Chroniese Pin the Spirit Eater hunting under the sea. These monsters had broken through from the netherworld into his own. Bligh remembered the words of the Nether Watchers. It is very dangerous to play with reality. They had been right. The sea was boiling as these magical vents suffered, making the rain, soaking their home. He had broken into the netherworld so many times, and now he was finally seeing the consequences. The fabric of reality had been breaking, and this one rip, in just the right place, had thrown his whole world off balance. He stared back at the black tear.
It can't be fixed.
Oh, really? A sharp voice came from above him. Strange, isn't it? The voice came again.
Who's there? Who are you?
Bligh asked, shielding his eyes from the strange darkness.
I'm amazed you don't remember. I'm quite important to what's going on here.
What? I don't...
The voice sounded so familiar.
Next to him, the potion poison pill gently floated down the tower, drifting in the currents. Throw it in, whispered the voice.
What?
Throw it in.
Bligh looked from the rip to the potion poison pill, and then back at the rip again.
What will happen?
He asked sceptically. Looking around, he was sure he was alone, but then the voice spoke again.
You'll make a choice. You'll have chosen something for yourself. You want to help your friends? You want to fight against your destiny as a ghost? You will have made a choice.
The voice was warm, kind, and still so familiar. You can make a choice and go back to the one who loves you.
How do you know about Delilah?
Bligh was shocked, staring around for the owner of the voice, and flew up the tower dangerously close to its rim. The voice was definitely coming from inside the rip. He heard it chuckle. I know a lot of things. A thin line of pink magic reached out and touched Bligh's forehead. His mind was filled with images of two little girls running around what looked like the castle back home. One playing with red magic, the other playing with white. They were joined by a group of other children. You love her so much, the one who carries something precious of yours, said the voice.
Papa!
The girls cried happily as the images faded.
I...
Bligh could only stammer.
What will you do, ghost? The voice asked softly. Bligh looked at the tiny ball of ingredients by his tail. Those little girls, He knew deep down who they must be. Something stirred within him. All the anger he'd felt about his situation, the unfairness of his life, his fear for the future, it all melted away. It didn't matter compared to the people in that castle, his friends, Delilah, those 2 little girls. Bligh found himself picking up the ball. As soon as he touched it, the fear started coming back again.
I want...
His mind moved slowly as he looked up at the tear.
I want them to live!
Throwing the potion poison pill at the void was like throwing a stone at a mirror. It suddenly had substance it was not designed to deal with. The ingredients dispersed, scattering into glittering white pieces that attached themselves to the tattered rim of the rip. The edges drew together to repair themselves on their own. The vent shook stronger than ever. The magical flow was about to be set free. Too late, Bligh realised he was in a very wrong place. The flow of magic caught hold of him, and suddenly he was pinned against the rip, fighting not to be pushed through. The darkness in the void was crumbling. Then a face appeared. A face that filled every inch of Bligh with fear and dread. Those dark pink eyes, the pale skin. Massive amounts of magic and energy spewed into and around the void. Bligh fought as hard as he could to stay. The force felt like it was about to shred him to pieces. "Thank you, sweet ghost," said the Witch of Glass Mountains, smiling warmly at him. "I'll see you soon." In a fizzing, bubbling instant, the rip closed. The witch was gone, and all the magic in the vent was finally released. Bligh was hurled forwards in a surge of magic, water, and noise. It was all colour, all pain. Then everything blazed into white. Without any warning, the sea swelled under the ship. Before anyone knew what was happening, an immense surge of magic burst from deep beneath them, sending boiling water and shining magic 100 feet in the air. The ship was thrown backwards, its hull and masts splintering. No one could do anything to stop it. No one had time to think or grab hold of anything before they were all hurled into the sea. The water that had been thrown into the sky plummeted back down on top of them in a deluge of magic and pieces of ship.
GA!
Screamed Delilah, choking and coughing as she surfaced, looking around wildly. Before she could dive back down again, she was hauled out of the water by Annie and EA onto the largest piece of ship they could find. The others also struggled, grasping at floating wreckage before paddling, then scrambling onto the shredded piece of ship where Annie and EA clung on with Delilah.
"What happened?"
shouted Honno.
Look at the sea!"
Abrian pointed a shaking hand to the open water. All around them the vapour was dispersing. Something hazy shimmered in the air, like the remnants of crystal clear, colourless magic. The waves lapping the wreckage grew cooler with every minute.
"The potion... the pill!"
exclaimed Morphea.
GA had it! Whatever he did must have worked. The sea's cooling. The clouds are starting to clear. But where is GA?
said Gina, her eyes wide.
Hey! Hello!
Annie called across the sea.
GA, are you there?
He's not come back up, said EA.
A cold knot had suddenly tightened in his chest.
Joji!
Delilah shouted, crawling to the edge of their raft.
Don't! It's not safe!
said Dominator, pulling her away from the sea, but Delilah fought back.
No, let me go! He should have come back! He should have come out!
She cried, panic rising in her voice as she made to dive back in. Dominator held her back as best he could, but she fought so hard EA had to seize hold of her as well.
Let me go! Joji! Joji, please come out!
Her voice cracked into sobs as she struggled, kicking and punching at EA as she fought to be released. EA held onto her tight, his face deathly white. No response came from below. All was silent and blue. The shock of the explosion, the brief, elated realization that their plan had worked and the rain would stop, all seeped away as the minutes lengthened and GA didn't reappear. Still they waited. It had been more than an hour now. The mists were clearing to reveal a flat and beautiful sea, untroubled by waves or wind. The only movement was the ripples circling the wreckage of the ship and their makeshift raft. The day dragged itself across the sky, and one by one they fell silent. Alone and wrecked in the middle of a faraway sea, they all kept scanning the water, the sky, the horizon for any sign of their friend, but a cold chill was creeping around all of them, a sense that something must have happened. When everything they planned had gone right, something else must have gone terribly wrong. Maybe something not even Gina the ghost could escape. The blast that hit them had been so powerful, so full of magic and energy. From Gina throwing the pill to the water calming and then bursting upwards, it all happened in less than 2 minutes. Now they couldn't stop thinking over every detail. Delilah finally ran out of voice. She sat, still held firmly by Ie, her eyes searching the empty depths below. Ie didn't seem to be able to speak at all. That night was the loneliest any of them had ever known. They didn't know where they were or how they could find help. All they could do was hold tight to the raft and each other. When stars began to drift through the clouds, Annie whispered they should try and sleep while a couple of them kept lookout. Meanwhile, Morphea and Abrian tended to Tepid as best they could. He had been badly scalded by the blast, and his arms were burned an ugly red. All they could do was keep washing them in cold seawater. Its stinging salt must have been nearly unbearable, but the prince didn't make a sound. Perhaps he was past feeling the pain. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on the gentle sea around them. Morphea's head was spinning from when debris struck her. She felt sick and giddy, but forced herself to focus, to stay awake, and keep her vision in the gathering dark. Under his jacket, Honno could feel Pippa shivering. She was the warmest thing they had, but the tiny dragon didn't like being thrown about or doused in water. She was without doubt the bravest little creature he had ever known, but right now she was as bruised and frightened as the rest of them. Honno looked out to where the horizon must be in the empty blackness around them. It was all so quiet. The only sound the water gently slapping against the sodden wreckage. He realised he had never felt so afraid. He had no idea what was going to happen. He wanted to cry. He wanted to be anywhere in the wide world but where he was. But then again, at least it wasn't raining. That was why it was so silent. No rain. He had grown so used to it for so long, and now it wasn't there. With a bittersweet pang, he realised that after all they had been through, they had done it. Their task was finished. The roof in Aunt Bolivia's log store wouldn't leak anymore. Maybe she would have less to worry about now, and could spend more time doing things she enjoyed, with Betrin, Tessa and Mogwing, like looking after Betrin's little Baba when it came. They would all be all right. Somewhere far away from the fear and the wet where he was, his home was safe and dry, a haven where no amount of magic, weather, or sea monsters could ever reach it. No matter what might happen here, nothing would change that. His heart shook in his chest as Honno lay his head down on the damp timbers, and the chill took away the warm image of Aunt Bolivia's house. He was still on the raft, cold and afraid. He felt Gina's hand clasped tightly around his own. Through the darkness he could just make out the huddled shapes of Abrian, Dominator, Annie. The air was so still. He closed his eyes. If this was the way things were going to go, well, at least he'd be with his friends. The daylight was very soft. Which day was it? Honno's teeth were chattering. Shapes. There were shapes on the horizon coming closer, with white clouds above. They looked like sails. They were so tall. Honno closed his eyes again and drifted into dreams, full of snatches of voices he didn't recognise. People calling, a gentle rocking motion like the bow of a ship moving through waves. He hoped he wouldn't wake too soon. It was so warm.
Hey. A gentle voice called to Gina. You can wake up any time you want, kid. Gina slowly opened his eyes. He wasn't underwater anymore. It was quiet. It was calm. Gina sat straight up in shock and confusion. Why wasn't it raining? Ah, you're awake. Why wasn't it raining? Glad to see you're still sort of with us.
Why isn't it raining?
Chie spluttered out. Looking around, he couldn't see anyone. He was in a field of green grass. Over to his left in the distance, he could just about see a large tree, with a swing hanging from it overlooking a gorge. Well, we don't get much rain here. It's usually sunny. A smiling man was suddenly next to Chie. He wore long white robes with bell sleeves that hid his hands. Looking at his face, Chie realised he couldn't quite make out any features. They were there, but they morphed and changed subtly, so none were quite in focus.
Who...
Chie found himself a little lost for words.
Where? Yes, where am I?
Ah, I'm surprised you don't recognise it from the stories your mother and father told you, the man said, leaning back using his arms to support his weight and looking up into the clear sky.
What?
You're dead, Joji, the man said, almost laughing.
Yes, I know that, I'm a ghost,
Chie said, confused. Not quite, kiddo, the man said, turning his attention to Chie.
What? Yes,
Chie suddenly realised his hands could feel the grass beneath him, and the hair in front of his face was brown, not blue. Looking down, he saw he had legs. Lifting one of them up, he inspected it. He couldn't believe it was real. It's not going away, if that's what you're wondering. The man sighed and looked towards the tree. I'm amazed he didn't want to come and say hello. Chie followed the man's eyeline and saw that someone was on the swing. He couldn't quite make out who they were, but they had red hair. He still feels guilty. I wonder if he'll regret not greeting you. Chie looked at the man, confused.
Joji?
Chie heard Delilah's voice crying.
Delilah?
She's all right, the man said calmly, taking in a deep breath and releasing it in a sigh. I have a question for you, kid. Chie was looking for Delilah. You can stay here. Rest your soul. Chie! Ie's voice shouted. Or you can go back to them. Live life with them.
Where are they?
Chie said, still frantically looking. They're still alive, Chie. They won't be coming here for a while. You don't have to make your decision now. You can stay a while. Have a rest. Enjoy having legs, the man smiled. And wait until they get here.
Don't you dare die on me, Joji Aluiciuous! Not again, not again!
Delilah's voice rang out. Or you can go back to them. You don't have to die just yet. The man lay back, resting his head in his hands. I get the feeling I know which option you'll choose. Chie looked around at the landscape in front of him and realised where he was.
Can I bring Delilah next time?
Well, that's assuming you both come back here next time you die. Chie turned quickly to face the man. Don't panic, I'm kidding. There's a space for you and all your friends here. Chie breathed a sigh of relief. You know, the man said, I am so proud of you and your brave choices. He smiled. I've often said, there's no greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Chie stayed quiet. There was a gravity to those words he'd never experienced before. In his heart of hearts, Chie knew exactly what he wanted to do, though it wasn't going to be easy. It could even be painful, and yet it felt right. The man looked at him kindly as Chie made his choice. There was no blame in his eyes, no accusation, just pure honesty. He placed a hand on Chie's shoulder. Whatever you choose, you must remember, I will always be with you.
Then I'd like to go back and see them all, including my daughters.
Ah, yes. Madame showed you them, didn't she? The man chuckled. They will be with you soon. The White Queen has made sure of that. Chie grinned hearing this news. Right. Let's get you back home. Lay down. Chie complied and the man sat next to him. Placing one hand on Chie's forehead and the other on his chest, he slowly started pushing Chie into the ground. It gave way around him,
and soon water started pushing up through the cracks, covering him once more. Bligh felt himself being pulled down. The warm water continued to cover him until he was falling down through it with his own weight, rather than being pushed. Looking up through the ripples, Bligh saw the man's smiling face looking down on him as he waved. His face solidified into that of a happy, middle-aged man. Smile lines adorned his face and crinkled around his eyes. His grey eyes were bright and full of life. Bligh was looking forward to coming back.